Everyone, welcome to the Dyl Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and welcome to my third Oscar predictions video for 2023. I did one at the very beginning of the year when we haven't seen really anything, and then I did one right before the festivals started at the end of the summer, and now I'm doing a video right after the festivals have ended. All the big festivals are pretty much over. Cannes has passed, TIFF, New York Film Festival, all these big festivals that kind of give us that taste of what exactly we should keep our eyes on for Oscar season. And honestly, it's done a little bit of shifting here. One film in particular, which we'll talk about, I think has gotten a huge surge, particularly from TIFF, that we'll talk about in just a second. But I just wanted to say, first and foremost, thanks to everyone who checked out the Dyl Pickle Movie Network TikTok page for the month of October, where I was posting a different horror film review every single day. I'm back now just focusing on the channel itself to kind of catch up with some videos that I missed, doing reviews for some films that I'd never got to review on here, like Killers of the Flower Moon, like The Holdovers, and then all of the things I saw at New York Film Fest, which I'm still in the process of putting a video together for. It was a very busy October for me, and I'm very excited to now be back in the swing of things for Oscar season. So let's take it away. We always start with the big one here just because I'd rather get all of your attention right off the bat and not just start off with something like documentary where you guys haven't seen a bunch of them. This is Best Picture, and this is going to be very interesting because I feel like as the weeks have gone on, we've kind of cemented at least kind of the top 13 to 15 films that will be competing here. I do have 20 listed here, but I think with every passing day, it becomes clearer and clearer that I think 7 or 8 of these films are pretty safe for a nomination at this point. I think everything from Oppenheimer to Maestro here is pretty safe for a Best Picture nomination. And if it were not to get a Best Picture nomination right now, I think it would be a big surprise. Now, obviously, this is before any of the awards have come out except for Gotham nominations and then the Hollywood Music Critics Association or something. So we don't have a lot to go on in terms of precursors, but I just think in general, the kind of general consensus of things, I think Oppenheimer is clearly your favorite right now. Obviously that can change. In most cases, it will change. Where the front runner all season ends up kind of tailing off. Look at Power of the Dog. Everything Everywhere All at Once, though, was a front runner from beginning to end. So we will see with Oppenheimer. But I think the big competition has kind of come out the past few months as Poor Things. I think Poor Things is going to be the one that kind of gives Oppenheimer a run for its money. Poor Things kind of fits that Everything Everywhere banner a little bit more in terms of kind of the zaniness and kind of being a film that's a little bit more out there and a little more weird. I haven't seen it yet, but I think Oppenheimer fits the bill of the film that is just kind of the big kind of marquee prestige picture of the year. That and Killers of the Flower Moon, which is why it's number 3 in terms of the films that people are not only talking about a lot, but are kind of getting praised across the board. You don't find a lot of people detracting from Oppenheimer or Killers of the Flower Moon or Poor Things for that matter. And the same with The Holdovers. I think The Holdovers, as we've seen just from the few weeks since its release, people love it. I loved it, and I can't wait to give you guys a review for it. But I think The Holdovers feels the most Oscar-y of all the films this season, but in a good way where it kind of feels like one of those old classic Oscar films of the 70s and 80s. It doesn't necessarily feel like it's trying to be Oscar bait. It just is Oscar bait. Oh my God, there's a bug. It is, the bug agrees. It is Oscar bait because it is just very well made and very well catered to a specific demographic, though I think a lot of people can enjoy it. Now, number 5 is the film I want to talk about. This is the one I alluded to earlier, and that is American Fiction. This is a film that was not on anyone's radars, really. I mean, if it was on your radar, good job. You should go to a casino now or buy a lottery ticket because you are very, very good at telling things ahead of time. But once TIFF came around and this film won the audience award at TIFF, I immediately put it in my top 10. And that is because every single year for the past 10 to 15 years, the TIFF Audience Award winner has never missed a Best Picture nomination. If American Fiction were to not get a Best Picture nomination, it would be the first time in a long time that that stat has not panned out. Now, I know because of CODA a few years ago, people have said, don't pay attention to the stats. And I think that is true when it comes to winners. But when it comes to nominees, I think the TIFF stat is one that you cannot ignore. And that's why I think American Fiction is almost surely going to be a Best Picture nomination. And I think, honestly, the fact that it is such a Best Picture nomination favorite now, I think it's kind of opened up the door for a few other categories to have a little bit more competition. For example, Best Actor, maybe Best Original Score, categories that almost seemed locked up, but then you have a film like American Fiction come out that ends up being such a crowd pleaser. I mean, this is a film that won the awards over The Holdovers, which is a very crowd pleasing kind of audience award baity film. I mean, it feels like the film that should have won the audience award was The Holdovers. So the fact that American Fiction won the audience award over The Holdovers makes me think it's definitely going to go over well with the Academy. At number 6, I have Barbie. I do think it's going to get nominated. I think a lot of people are putting it at like number 1 or number 2. I still am not quite there yet. Pretty safe to say it's still going to get nominated because, like Oppenheimer, I think this is one of the films that's just going to be the film of 2023 just in terms of popularity and impact, kind of like Everything Everywhere All at Once was last year, kind of like Parasite was in 2019. Two films I have right back here. I really do think Barbie is going to get that Best Picture nomination, even though if you had told me months and months ago, I would have said, really, the Barbie movie? And yeah, really, the Barbie movie. It's that good. Past Lives is my number 7. It's been slowly kind of climbing down the ladder, but I don't think it's out. I think it's pretty safe for a nomination still. I think because also A24 is backing it. Now, A24 has a couple other horses in the race, which gives me a little bit of pause and a little bit of concern. The good thing about Past Lives is that it has had the actors 100% support the whole way through these strikes because SAG and A24 made a good deal, and A24 is able to use their actors in campaigning, and I think that's going to go a long way, especially for this film because it has had kind of the entire year to build that steam and build that hype, and it just got nominated for a Gotham Award for Best Film, which none of the other films here have, so I think that kind of bodes well for its chances. At number 8, I have Maestro. This is a film that I know before it came out, people were hesitant because the test screenings weren't all that good, but having actually seen it and seeing other people see it and their reactions to it, I think this is definitely going to get an Oscar nomination just because it just feels like a prestige Best Picture nominee type film. And it has so many things going for it technically that I think it's going to get a lot of tech nominations like cinematography, sound. So I really think we're going to see Maestro in the race. Now, these last 2 slots is kind of where I've finagled a few different films in and out of. Spider-Verse is one that I was tempted to put in there, but I think with every passing week, especially with Barbenheimer kind of taking the thunder away from Spider-Verse, I don't see a world now where Spider-Verse is a Best Picture nominee as much as it is an animated feature frontrunner that kind of ends up on the bubble but not quite getting in. It's kind of like what happened with Pinocchio last year, where a lot of people were convinced for like a short amount of time that it was going to be a Best Picture nomination, but for animated to get into Best Picture, just so rare. The last time it happened was Up, Toy Story 3. So I really just don't see it happening again. Still 2010, that was a long time ago. So the ones I've been kind of toying around with, obviously, The Color Purple is the biggest question mark. Is Color Purple going to be good? We have had no early reactions yet. We haven't seen it at a festival. It is one of those films that has just the biggest question mark, which is why I ultimately left it out of my 10 finally. May, December also, I just don't know how that reception is going to. This Fly really loves these Oscar predictions. It just wants in on all these predictions. Thank you, Fly. I hope you didn't bite me. I hope you're not a mosquito. Anyway, May, December, I also left out just because I think it's going to be a very polarizing film. I think some people are going to absolutely love it, but then there are going to be some people that say, it wasn't for me. And then you have the 2 international films that I think are going to be duking it out here. And I actually have both of them in my 10 right now. And that is The Zone of Interest, which I think is pretty much the international film frontrunner, and then Anatomy of a Fall. The only reason I have Anatomy of a Fall at number 10 is because France did not submit it for the international film selection for France. Each country gets to submit one film, and France instead decided to submit The Taste of Things, which I think is an amazing motion picture, so I'm happy they did it. But Anatomy of a Fall, it could have that Portrait of a Lady on Fire problem, where because they submit a different film for international feature, the Academy just completely overlooks Anatomy of a Fall. But I think because it has strength in Best Actress, I think it's a big contender for original screenplay. I think because it has some of those other above the line categories that it will be competitive in, I think it will still have a shot at a Best Picture nomination. But that's why it's number 10, because I could definitely see a world where it doesn't get nominated because not enough people see it because it was not submitted by France. And that is my biggest fear for that film. I have not seen that film yet. Maybe by the time this video comes out, I will have seen it. But those are kind of the 13 films I'm looking at. Obviously, I have Origin here. That's been getting some good buzz. All of Us Strangers has been getting great buzz, but that kind of feels like this year's After Sun. And maybe it's a coincidence because Paul Mescal is in both of those films, but it feels like one of those films that's very much more a critic darling. I think Air has kind of fallen out. I think if we're going to get an early film like Elvis last year that gets in here, I think it's going to be Oppenheimer, Barbie, or Past Lives. I just think Air hasn't had the staying power I think a lot of people expected it to. The Iron Claw, it's another one like Color Purple where we haven't gotten a lot of early reactions because it's coming out on Christmas. So if A24 gets a good late push for that, I could see that happening. Otherwise, yeah, I think that is kind of the top 13 is kind of where we're looking at. And I think it's going to narrow down even more in the next few weeks. weeks. Moving on to director, I mean, the top two stay the same. It's Nolan and Scorsese. I don't necessarily know if either of them are going to win. I could see Nolan winning for sure, but I think they're definitely the biggest locks for nominations. And then I have Yorgos Lanthimos, just because I think Poor Things is going to be Oppenheimer's biggest competition for picture. I think that's why it gets in there. Jonathan Glazer, same thing I said last time. There's always an international director in here, even when you think there's not going to be. Look at 2020, another round, Thomas Vinterberg. Look at 2018, Roma got in and Cold War got in. They love their international directors, which makes me think Jonathan Glazer is going to get in here for the zone of interest because it is the international film frontrunner. And then for that fifth slot, I really toyed around. I really wanted to put Greta Gerwig in there because I think with more time, I've really been convinced that Barbie is going to be kind of one of those, if it has a spot for a nomination, it's going to get that nomination. That kind of movie where even if it's not necessarily everyone's favorite, people are still going to nominate it everywhere. And I really think there's a chance Greta Gerwig gets in here. The only problem is, after seeing The Holdovers, I don't see a world where Alexander Payne doesn't get in here, because this just feels like a film that just gets picture, director, screenplay, actor. Like, this just feels like one of those movies that kind of gets that package. But I don't know. I'm not so sure. Alexander Payne could miss here, but I think because he's been nominated for other films in the Best Picture kind of director matchup here, I definitely think Payne has that edge over Gerwig, but Gerwig could definitely slide in. So I think those two are the real ones battling it out. I've kind of knocked Celine Song out of there just because I think with more films coming out of the festival buzz, I think Past Lives, while it still held on well, I don't think it has as much support as it did early on in the year. So I think Celine Song's chances slip. And I think if they do include a woman amongst the nominees, not to say they're not going to include multiple, but I really think Greta Gerwig would be the selection if they are to pick one. Now, it would be a cool year if two women got in, which is why I also have Justine Triet there for Anatomy of a Fall. I just don't know if the Academy's cool enough this year to do that, honestly, especially with like these big names like Nolan and Scorsese and Jonathan Glazer, who's well respected and who hasn't gotten nominated. I mean, it's really going to be tough, but I would love to see a world where three women get nominated. Hell, I would love to see a world where four get in, and we add Kelly Freeman Craig from Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, or even Ava DuVernay for Origin. I mean, it's possible we could get a lot of women in this category. That's why I've always said maybe directors should also expand to 10, just because I think it's really hard to narrow it down to just 5 directors, but that's what I've got right now. Moving on to actor, Cillian Murphy still remains the surest bet for a nomination. Now, who I think is going to win, I still couldn't call it. It could be Cillian Murphy. It could be Bradley Cooper, because Bradley Cooper's very overdue, hence why he's number 2. Paul Giamatti, also overdue, which is why he's number 3. The next 3 slots is where I have like this really impossible tug of war here, because Leonardo DiCaprio should feel like a sure thing, but I think with so many of these kind of new, kind of first-time nominees, like Cillian Murphy's never been nominated before. Jeffrey Wright would never be nominated before. Coleman Domingo would be a first-time nominee as well. Andrew Scott. I could see a world where people just don't vote for DiCaprio because he's DiCaprio. He's always nominated for everything he does. So maybe there's a world where they say, maybe we don't need to give DiCaprio a nomination, even though he's great in Killers of the Flower Moon. I think a lot of people leave that film thinking about Lily Gladstone and even Robert De Niro before they do DiCaprio. And that's not to say DiCaprio's bad in the film. He's excellent in the film, but I think it's because we kind of expect a quality performance like that from DiCaprio, whereas De Niro is giving a performance that we've never seen from him. And Lily Gladstone is such an unknown name that has kind of like surged into the kind of household name territory. So I think Leonardo DiCaprio could be the shocking snub of the year, which is why I have him outside at number 6. I know it's crazy, but my gut is just telling me that Coleman Domingo is going to get a nomination. I've said it from the beginning. I said this 2 years ago before Rustin got delayed. I was like, as soon as they announced that film and as soon as I saw who was playing Rustin and it was Coleman Domingo, I was like, there's no way he's not going to get nominated for that. Even though with every passing day, I'm a little worried that he's going to miss. I just really have that gut instinct that he'll make it in. And Jeffrey Wright, this is kind of what I was saying earlier with American Fiction. Because American Fiction is on a surge, I think Jeffrey Wright kind of could come along for the ride. Because if you look at a Best Picture film, usually a Best Picture film has a package. They have a bunch of nominees with it. Very rarely do you see a picture just get a Best Picture nomination and nothing else. I think the last time we got a 1 or 2 package film was Selma in 2015, where it was just Best Picture and Best Original Song. And I think this could be a case scenario where, because American Fiction is looking like a sure bet for a nomination, we see it get Best Actor and Screenplay and these other awards that maybe we weren't predicting a few months ago. But now, because American Fiction is becoming more and more of a contender, we can put it in here. So I have Jeffrey Wright at 4 for that reason. But this is really, I think, a 6-horse race. I think one of these 6 guys is missing. I don't see anyone. Andrew Scott, as great as he is, Joaquin Phoenix, TOU, Zac Efron, even for the Iron Claw, which is a transformative performance. I don't see any of them getting in. I really think it's going to be one of these 6 gets snubbed. Right now, I'm predicting DiCaprio, just because I think it would also create the biggest reaction on Oscar nomination morning, but I really don't know. Moving on to actress, as I said earlier, Poor Things seems to be the biggest competition for Oppenheimer for picture, and I think Emma Stone, by that nature, comes along as the best actress frontrunner. But Lily Gladstone kind of has been rising and surging, especially since she announced that she was switching from supporting actress to best actress. Not that she was switching, not that she was ever originally in supporting actress, but I think that's where we all thought she would be. That's where I thought she would be. She was number 1 for supporting last time. But I really think, regardless of category, she's getting in. And same with Carey Mulligan. I think a lot of people are going to say, oh, Carey Mulligan, she's supporting, right? But when you watch that film, you'll realize she is definitely a lead in that movie, and I think she's definitely going to get an Oscar nomination. Now, the next few slots are up for grabs. Anatomy of a Fall, like I said, if it has a Portrait of a Lady on Fire problem where no one sees it because it's not submitted by France, I think Sandra Hüller could be in trouble. But I think that film has garnered so much buzz already, and so much good word of mouth, and so much hype, and so much passion, that I don't see her missing. I still think she'll get in. And then the 5th slot, this is also very tough. I mean, this category is so stacked here, because I still think Fantasia Barrino for The Color Purple can get in. I think if that film is well received and the performances are well received, I think she is going to come along for the ride. Also, because she's got that Jennifer Hudson arc of, she was on American Idol, and then she played this role on Broadway, and then she went and played it in the movie. Jennifer Hudson didn't play it on Broadway, but you know what I mean. Margot Robbie for Barbie, though, you have to watch out for her, because if Barbie gets so many nominations, and if it gets director and screenplay and picture, it would almost feel weird if it didn't get actress, because Barbie is the central figure of that movie, especially with Ryan Gosling being such a strong contender in the other categories. So I definitely think there's a world Margot Robbie gets in, especially if Color Purple gets mid reviews or even poor reviews. I think Margot Robbie immediately shoots into that top 5. Now, Greta Lee for Past Lives has been slipping out of it. Again, this is just because, as more films have been kind of accumulating in the snowball effect, I think she's been kind of pushed on the wayside. And then Natalie Portman for May December. I'd really love for her to get in, but I just think it's too crowded of a category. And if May December doesn't get a Best Picture nomination, I don't think it'll get many nominations really at all. So I really think it depends on how big of a contender it is in picture. If it gets in for Best Picture, then I think Natalie Portman could get in here. Same with Annette Bening for Nyad. I think she's a strong contender in a film that I just don't think is going to be seen by enough people. And even if it is seen by a lot of people, I just think she's in such a crowded field right now. And same with Kaylee Spaney for Priscilla. She should be getting a nomination. She's probably a front runner to win in probably any other year, but this year is just so stacked, so I don't see it happening. Although I would love to see it happen for Priscilla, I don't know if it's going to happen. Moving on to supporting actor, I mean, the top 3 have kind of been the same 3: Rob, and Ryan all year. Robert Downey Jr. for Oppenheimer, Robert De Niro for Killers of the Flower Moon, Ryan Gosling for Barbie. 3 very different performances, 3 very different films, but those 3 seem locked in and loaded. As for the 4 and 5, a lot of people are putting both Dafoe and Ruffalo for Poor Things. I think one of them is going to get in. I definitely think one of them is going to get in. I just think in a year where there's so many contenders and so many great performances, I just think because of the nature of who's got a bigger role in the film, I think Ruffalo is doing a little bit more than Dafoe is in the film. So I think Ruffalo is going to get in. Now, my 5th slot, this is one that I haven't really heard a lot of people talking about, but I'm hoping I can be kind of the first one to start this kind of hype train and campaign, and that is Dominic Sessa for The Holdovers. I think when you watch The Holdovers, first of all, he should probably be campaigned in lead, but I think it's smart that he's going to be in supporting, because that lead category is so stacked, and I don't want to take away from Paul Giamatti, but he feels like the Lucas Hedges of this season. Now, remember in 2016, Manchester by the Sea, everyone was talking about Casey Affleck, Michelle Williams. Casey Affleck, Michelle Williams. Who else gets nominated on Oscar morning? Lucas Hedges. And I think this is exactly what's going to happen here. I think people are saying Paul Giamatti, Divine Joy Randolph. Paul Giamatti, Divine Joy Randolph. But who also gets nominated? Dominic Sessa, and I think it is one of those performances that is not just going to be a fun nomination in terms of surprise, but a great nomination in terms of quality, because I think he's that good. And of these five that I'm predicting, he may just be my second favorite of those five. I really think he is amazing in this film, and I really would love to see him get a nomination. Charles Melton, my heart really wants Charles Melton to get nominated here, but if May December misses out on picture and screenplay and actress, I just don't know if Charles Melton is going to be that exception. I think he's giving a great performance, but it is also an understated performance. I think it's a brilliant performance. I think people who watch that movie are going to be like, wow, that guy was amazing. But I just don't know if the Academy is going to see it in the same light as Ryan Gosling for Barbie, who's on every freaking picture of every review for that movie, or Mark Ruffalo or Willem Dafoe, who are giving these big performances, or De Niro or Downey Jr., who are kind of these villainous roles in their movies. I just think Charles Melton is a little too understated of a performance to get in here, though I'd love to see it. Same with John Magaro. I mean, he was looking like a sure thing until we realized how strong Poor Things was, until we realized how strong Oppenheimer was, The Holdovers. I really think a few months ago, John Magaro was a sure thing, and now he's unfortunately a poor thing. And he's in a lot of these past lives of Oscar predictions. I don't know, that was bad wordplay. I put Sterling K. Brown here just because, again, American Fiction needs a package. He could come along for the ride. Glenn Howerton for Blackberry seems like that passion pick that could happen, like Brian Tyree Henry did for Causeway. It could happen, but I don't see it happening. That's why he's number 10. Moving on to supporting actress, I kind of foreshadowed this earlier, but I have two Color Purple girls here in number 3 and 4. The reason I have them at 3 and 4 and not 1 and 2 is because if that movie isn't good, if it's mid, if it flops, then I don't want them to be number 1 and 2, because I think the nomination chances are less likely. Instead, at number 1 and 2, I'm going to put Divine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers. After seeing that movie, I think it's very clear that she is going to be a lot of people's standouts in a cast that's already stacked. And I do think just her character is written in a way that I think she has that kind of supporting actress arc. Almost, it kind of fits what we see with a lot of different supporting actresses, where they have like that one really key scene, but throughout they've just given this like kind of emotional tour de force performance. And it's someone who is relatively new, and I feel like supporting actress of all the categories we see kind of likes to award the newcomer. I mean, Ariana DeBose or the grandmother from Minari, these kind of performances that kind of make a career. And I think this is going to make Divine Joy Randolph's career soar. I mean, she's been in other stuff, but this is really the one that's going to kind of put her on the map as a prestige, big time Oscar player. And then I do have Emily Blunt. She has never been nominated. And with Oppenheimer being as strong as it is, I think this would be kind of cool to just see Emily Blunt get her first nomination. She has one terrific scene at the end of Oppenheimer. If you know, you know. And I think she'll get in as well. As for the 5th slot, I did have Julianne Moore there for a bit, but the more I think about it, if Natalie Portman and Charles Melton both miss, I just don't see the world where Julianne Moore, is the one they represent for this film. Now, not to say she's not good. I think she is good. I think she's the weakest of those three. But I think if the Academy were to not nominate Natalie Portman and Charles Melton, but still nominate Julianne Moore, it just doesn't feel right. Just having seen that film, I feel like if you're going to nominate Julianne Moore, you're also going to nominate Natalie Portman and Charles Melton. And it's kind of like one of those all or nothing things. Whereas I think Penelope Cruz, on the other hand, for Ferrari, is kind of the standout performance of that movie, and there's really nothing else. Like, I think Adam Driver missing doesn't hurt Penelope Cruz here, also because that movie is kind of cluttered with some really rough performances. I think Shailene Woodley in particular gives a really bad performance in that film. So I think kind of Penelope Cruz being kind of the emotional and most impressive performance in that film, I think could actually help her. And because a few years ago for Parallel Mothers, a lot of people were saying, wouldn't it be fun if Penelope Cruz got in because the Academy loves her, almost dismissing it. And then she did. So I think it could be another case scenario where people are like, oh, Penelope Cruz, the Academy loves her. Maybe she'll get in for Ferrari. And then she does. Especially if Color Purple isn't good, then I think Penelope Cruz could surge up. I think Jodie Foster can surge up. But I think Jodie Foster's in a similar bank to Julianne Moore, where why would Jodie Foster get in, but Annette Bening wouldn't? It's kind of one of those weird things where I feel like they both need to be in or none of them need to be in. Same as America Ferrera. Why would Margot Robbie miss, but America Ferrera makes it? But I still think America Ferrera has some key moments in that film that could put her on the radars. Rosamund Pike for Saltburn could happen. I'm getting very big Babylon vibes from that film. film where I don't think it's going to be a big player at all, despite Emerald Fennell's Promising Young Woman being a big hit. I just don't see the same happening for Saltburn. And then Sandra Hüller, we could see a double nomination because she did get nominated for the Gotham Awards for The Zone of Interest. I think she's really great in The Zone of Interest. So it would be really interesting to see her get a double nomination this year, even though I think there's so many talented people. I don't see them doing that just because they want to spread the wealth. The next few categories we're going to go through a little bit faster. Original screenplay. It seems that Barbie is going to go original. Originally, I had it at adapted, but if it does go original, I think it really helps it because I think right now it's kind of the holdovers versus past lives. But if Barbie can get that nomination, I think Barbie could win this, especially getting Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig on stage together. I think that could happen. But really, if you look at this 10, I mean, the 5 that I had predicted are all the 5 I had predicted in Best Picture. It's Barbie, The Holdovers, Past Lives, Anatomy of a Fall, and Maestro. The other 5 could get in May, December, Air, Origin, Saltburn, Rustin, but those films I'm not predicting for Best Picture. So that was pretty easy. Moving on to adapted, kind of a similar thing. I mean, the 4 films I put at the top here are all Best Picture contenders. Poor Things, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, American Fiction. Where the 5th slot ends up is a little different. I almost put The Zone of Interest, but after seeing The Zone of Interest, it just doesn't feel like a very screenplay movie. It feels much more of a direction forward movie. And that's not to dismiss the quality of it. Even though I wasn't the biggest fan of it, I think it's much more of an impressive technical achievement than it is on paper. I think, it's really about the vision more than it is about the writing. So I don't have Zone of Interest there. Instead, I have All of Us Strangers, just because I feel like a movie like All of Us Strangers, it's a very big critical darling. And I feel like every year we always get just that random one-off nomination. I believe The White Tiger got in a few years ago, and it was like the only nomination it got. I kind of see that being the case for All of Us Strangers, where it doesn't really pop up anywhere else because it's a little too small. It's like After Sun. After Sun got 1 nomination for Best Actor. I think All of Us Strangers, if it gets 1 nomination, I think this is where they would give it a nomination. So I'm actually feeling pretty good about that. I think All of Us Strangers could definitely get in there. But again, Color Purple is a big question mark. Spider-Verse, if it does get into picture, I think it also gets screenplay. Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. That's just me wishful thinking. So moving on to animated feature. Again, Spider-Verse seems like it's on top. Boy and the Heron, we were waiting to see from festivals if that would kind of give it a surge that it needed. It did give it a surge in the fact that people really do like it, but no one was leaving saying, that's it, that's going to get Best Picture nominated, like Spider-Verse was. I think a lot of people left Spider-Verse saying that is one of the greatest animated films ever, whereas Boy and the Heron, a lot of people have said, it's great, but I prefer Spirited Away, or I prefer The Wind Rises. I don't think a lot of people are leaving that saying this is going to be the best animated feature winner of the year. Then it gets a little tricky because I wanted to put TMNT Mutant Mayhem here, but it really hasn't been getting a lot of buzz since it came out. So I did put Elemental and Wish. I know it kind of feels a little weird to put both Disney films in now, especially with the state of how Disney is being operated right now and a lot of the bad press for it. But I really think Elemental showed that it had staying power. It became more popular and had good legs as it went on the box office. And I think Wish, I could see a world where they like that animation style. I personally, after the trailer, was a little more hesitant toward it. Everything I've seen of Wish has left me a little underwhelmed, but we haven't seen it yet. And I think once we see it, we'll know a better picture of it. So I think this category in general could be something that we gotta give it a little bit more time before we know for sure what we're going to put in here. Chicken Run Donna the Nugget is kind of my placeholder number 5 right now, though The Peasants, I really think could happen. That is the same production team behind the Vincent Van Gogh film from a few years ago, Loving Vincent, and Trolls Band Together. I have it predicted somewhere else for an Oscar nomination, so if that kind of pans out, I could see that getting in as well. It's a little bit of a weird category this year because I think it's so top-heavy with Across the Spider-Verse and Boy and the Heron, where like the next 3 or 4 slots, who's to say what's actually going to get in there. Moving on to some of the text. I haven't covered these in past videos, but let's go into it. Production design, I've got Barbie, pretty obvious. Poor Things, also obvious. Oppenheimer, also obvious. The next 2 are a little bit more up for grabs, but I went with Killers of the Flower Moon just because I think if there's a spot for it in these technical categories, it's going to get in. And then Asteroid City, that's a little bit of wishful thinking just because for right now, I'll put it as a placeholder because there's no reason it shouldn't get nominated, but we've seen a lot of Wes Anderson stuff get snubbed unfairly. Cinematography, I think this is Oppenheimer, but again, Killers of the Flower Moon and Poor Things. You're going to see Killers of the Flower Moon, Poor Things, and Oppenheimer in pretty much every tech category just because they're both so strong. You also have Maestro. There's no way you can watch that trailer and not go, cinematography, there it is. I watched the actual movie itself and I went, cinematography, there it is. So I think that's going to happen. And then zone of interest. It's not the most eye-catching, but I do think if you hear about how they filmed that movie, they kind of hid cameras around the house, almost like a hidden camera, and they just told the actors to go inside the house and act. Obviously with the script, obviously they didn't improv it, but he basically, Jonathan Glazer was like, no, we're not going to make you feel like the camera's on you. We want you to just kind of live in the moment. The cameras will be there, but you won't necessarily be conscious of the cameras. So there was a lot of planning that went into the cinematography of this in a way that kind of reminds me of Deakins with 1917, how it was just so meticulously planned out where the camera would be at all times, how things would be lit, especially with the natural lighting in this film. So I think with all those things in account, I think Zone of Interest should and will get a nomination for cinematography. Moving on to film editing, again, the big three: Oppenheimer, Poor Things, Killers of the Flower Moon. They're going to get editing nominations, as is The Holdovers. I think The Holdovers is not as flashy with its editing, but every year we kind of see a more subtle editing movie get in. Last year was Banshees of Inisherin, and the year before it was Belfast. These movies that don't necessarily scream editing like Everything Everywhere All at Once does, but it does still have really impressive editing, especially with The Holdovers being really comedic at times. I think the editing is so purposeful there. And then Barbie, because I think it's going to be one of those things where, when in doubt, put Barbie in there. This is one of those cases. And then costume design, I actually think Barbie's a front runner for obvious reasons, but I think Poor Things could give it a run for its money, as could The Color Purple, depending on how the reviews are there. I think Killers of the Flower Moon has some good period costumes, and Wonka, this could be where they award Wonka. I'm not sure. We haven't seen the movie, but from the trailers, I think there's going to be a lot of dazzling, eye-catching, colorful costumes. And a Paul King film has never been nominated for an Oscar, so I hope maybe this is where they kind of catch on that he's one of the most visually interesting directors working today, from the Paddington films and now for Wonka. Hopefully, I hope Wonka's good. The trailers haven't really convinced me, but hey, I have faith in Paul King. Even if the trailers are bad, I'm hoping the movie's good. Moving on to makeup and hairstyling. This is kind of the biggest, like, take the food, throw it at the wall, see what sticks and what falls to the floor category, because I think Maestro is super safe. I think Maestro is the front runner, far and above. I mean, the stuff they do to Bradley Cooper to age him up, the old age makeup is so, so good. And I know there's been controversy about the nose, but I think because Bernstein's family has commented on it in a very empathetic way, I think that helps the makeup designer's case here. I think Poor Things, I mean, that shot of Willem Dafoe, it's very, very impressive, the makeup there. So I'd love to see that get a nomination. And then Guardians 3, I think the prosthetics there, the practical effects and all the makeup is so amazing that if this doesn't get a makeup nomination, I will literally walk barefoot to California and riot outside the Dolby Theater to make sure Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 gets a makeup nomination. As for the other slots, again, this is one of those categories where it's like, if Barbie's there, throw it in, because I think Barbie has some pretty impressive hairstyling, not as much makeup, but I think there is a very distinct look to the film that I think the makeup and hairstyling aids in. And then Golda. Golda just feels like one of those random nominations that happens Oscar morning where everyone goes, what movie is that? It's the one with Helen Mirren. She gets a lot of makeup done in the movie. There's a lot of hairstyling. So it could be like a Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, even though I love that movie, where people are looking at it like, I haven't really heard much about that film. I think this could be kind of that category. I don't know. There wasn't really one that was screaming out at me. I think Oppenheimer could get in here, but I just don't necessarily think Oppenheimer is a very makeup heavy movie, except for the very end where they have the old age makeup. And even then, I thought the makeup looked a little weird. The old age makeup for Cillian Murphy and Emily Blunt. That was the one aspect of the movie that I didn't love. So I don't think it'll get in here. Best sound, Oppenheimer, obviously. Maestro, being a music-based film, I think will get in. Zone of Interest, again, it's a very unconventional use of sound, but when it uses sound and how it uses sound, the way we hear stuff from the concentration camps without seeing it in the film is so impactful. So I think that'll definitely get a sound nomination. Killers of the Flower Moon, same thing. I mean, it deals a lot with violence, and there's a lot of gunshots and a lot of Native American instrumentation, just like beatings of the drums and stuff like that I think will be awarded for sound. And then Ferrari, because cars going vroom vroom equals Oscar nomination. Moving on to visual effects, this is also such a crazy year for visual effects, because Dune is no longer in the conversation. It wasn't when we made the last video, so I didn't bring it up at the top of this video, but who's to say what's going to happen with visual effects? I guess The Creator is your number one, followed by Guardians 3. I do have Oppenheimer there. Oppenheimer's very interesting because Oppenheimer is practical only. There's no CGI, so I could see a world where the visual effects branch is like, it's not it's all practical. We're going to award the other films. But I think if it can get the nomination, I actually would put Oppenheimer as probably my predicted number one to win, because I think the battle here for Oppenheimer is getting that nomination. Once it gets a nomination, I think people will vote for it to win because they love all the explosions. But I think it's going to be convincing the visual effects branch itself to nominate the film. I think that's going to take a little bit more work. And then we usually kind of see some big blockbusters. Usually they're Marvel films. I already have Guardians 3 here, but we see maybe some Disney remakes or maybe some Transformers films, and that's why I did put Transformers: Rise of the Beasts here. I will not put Little Mermaid here just because I really, really, really hate the CGI in Little Mermaid. And if Little Mermaid gets in, it means that Disney put on a really, really good presentation at the Visual Effects Society meeting, because I really do not see a world where that film gets nominated. Same as Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny. There are some impressive visual effects, but ultimately the marquee visual effects, being the de-aging of Harrison Ford, is so bad that I just really don't think that'll get a nomination, which is why I put Dungeons and Dragons here, because of all the big blockbusters we've seen this year. I would say Dungeons and Dragons probably has the most impressive CGI. I think the actual visual presentation of that movie is very good, especially the scene where like Chris Pine's face is doing that weird thing. I really think this could get in. Obviously, this is such an up in the air category. You could even see Poor Things get in here. You could see Little Mermaid, Indiana Jones, maybe even like a Blue Beetle or the Marvels. This really could go any which way. And I'm hoping we get like kind of an underrated surprise visual effects contender late in the year that we're all like, oh, wait, yeah, that had a lot of great visual effects, kind of like 13 Lives last year. I hope we get that, because none of these, visual effects bubble nominations I was that passionate about, except for like obviously the creators got great visual effects, Guardians 3 and Oppenheimer. Like I really think those three are safe. It's more like the other two slots, I'm just not sure. Rise of the Beasts looked convincing enough just by looking at it, especially with the animal robot things. I guess the robot things would be Transformers. Sorry, the animal Transformers. I didn't see the movie. I don't care. Moving on now to our music categories. And here I gave a full 10 because these are very, very tough categories to predict, and it's why I almost saved them for last. Starting with original score, I think Ludwig Göransson is going to win for Oppenheimer. There is an amazing moment in the film where Niels Bohr turns to Oppenheimer and says, "Can you hear the music? Can you hear it, Robert?" And then boom, it cuts to the most beautiful heavenly orchestral music as there's like a shot of these mountains. I think it's some of the best music in film in years, so I definitely think that'll get in. And then Robbie Robertson, this would be a posthumous nomination for Killers of the Flower Moon. I think that will definitely get in, because not only is it a posthumous award nomination, and the Oscars love to kind of dedicate award nominations to people who have passed that they respect, but also because the score in that film is very well utilized and very good. And then I just think because it's one of the big three contenders, I have Poor Things in there. Then for the fourth and fifth slot, I kind of toyed around with a couple different options. I ultimately settled on Laura Cartman for American Fiction, and this kind of goes along with my bigger overall kind of philosophy about American Fiction getting into Best Picture. I think it's going to pick up some techs, and it's not a really tech heavy movie, so I think it's going to pick up score maybe and editing. I think that could kind of be the package it gets. I don't have it predicted in editing right now, but I think if it were to pick up some text, I think score is one of the more likely ones. Then the fifth slot, I really wanted to go with one of the animated films. I wanted to go with Daniel Pemberton for Across the Spider-Verse because it's an immaculate score. I wanted to go with Thomas Newman for Elemental because it is a really nice score. And then I wanted to go with The Boy and the Heron because that is a composer that is long overdue, a filmmaker that is well beloved. But ultimately, I went with Michael Levy for The Zone of Interest because it is probably my favorite score next to Oppenheimer all year. I mean, the score in that movie in Zone of Interest is so unsettling. It's only literally like 5 to 10 minutes of score that they use sporadically throughout the movie. But when it happens and how it happens and the volume and the immersion of that score, it's amazing. So I hope it gets in. And I think Zone of Interest is going to get a lot of tech nominations. I have it in sound. I have it in cinematography. I can see it getting score. I think Zone of Interest is going to be a bigger contender than a lot of people predict it to be. I mean, look at All Quiet on the Western Front last year. It got 4 Oscars. It won 4 Oscars. So the fact that All Quiet won 4 Oscars and Zone of Interest, which is, first of all, a better movie than All Quiet, and second of all, probably a more technically impressive movie, just in what they're doing technically, I think it's going to get in a lot more places that people don't see coming. Original song, this is also very hard because the question I had was, are they going to award 2 Barbie songs with nominations? And I think they are. I think the songs are so different that What Was I Made For, the Billie Eilish song, and I'm Just Ken, they're so different. One is diegetic, one's non-diegetic. One is sung in the film, one is kind of used as underscoring for the film. So I think because of that, I think they both get in because they are so different. And then I have Better Place. That's the NSYNC revival song. I know Justin Timberlake has been getting some really bad press right now, but I think just the idea of an NSYNC reunion, and because Can't Stop the Feeling got nominated for the first Trolls movie, I think this one could find its way in because this category, they don't really care about how good the film is. I mean, we saw a lot of Despicable Me movies get in this category, so I really don't think it has to be a good movie to get in. And then we have Flamin' Hot, The Fire Inside. Why is Flamin' Hot here? Why is Flamin' Hot going to be an Oscar nominee? It's because Diane Warren wrote the music, people, and Diane Warren hasn't missed an Oscar nomination in how many years? Go check IMDb and then tell me because I think it's been a long time. The fifth slot is where I kind of toyed around with a lot of different films. This Wish from Wish feels like the obvious pick, but I just don't necessarily know if Wish is going to be as successful as I think people think it is. I mean, we have heard that song in every single trailer, but I think it might go to Road to Freedom from Rustin. That is a Lenny Kravitz song, so you would also be getting that celebrity factor there. And I Am from Origin. Obviously, Ava DuVernay has won Best Song for a film before. Selma won Best Song, one of her films. So another Ava DuVernay film could also win a Best Song, at least a nomination. I think that could happen for I Am. Peaches from Super Mario Brothers movie, if that gets nominated, I think it's solely for the reason that it was a fun bit in the movie, not because it's an actually good song. But hey, it'd be fun to see Jack Black perform it at the Oscars, right? And I still think, listen, I still think there's a world where even if Peaches doesn't get nominated, even if I'm Just Ken doesn't get nominated, I still think there's a world where Jack Black still presents an Oscar and then like sings Peaches as an intro. Like, I still think there's a world where we still hear Peaches on Oscar night, even if it's not nominated. Same with I'm Just Ken. If I'm Just Ken gets snubbed because they want to spread the wealth and only award one Barbie song, I think it'll be Billie Eilish. But if I'm Just Ken doesn't make it into the five, they're still going to perform it at the Oscars. Barbie is the biggest film of the year. There's no world that I can conceive where I'm Just Ken does not open or close or is the centerpiece of the Oscars. Like, I really think, regardless of the nomination, I think it's definitely going to get performed there. Moving on to the final two categories, international and documentary. This is the hardest one to predict because I haven't seen a lot of the films. International, I have seen those top two, Zone of Interest and The Taste of Things, and I'm very convinced they're going to get nominated. The Taste of Things is the one that France submitted over Anatomy of a Fall, and it is one of my top 5 films of the year so far. So that should tell you all you need to know about how good it is. Perfect Days, Wim Wenders is a very respected filmmaker. He hasn't been nominated for any of his directorial work in international, only in documentary, but I think this film has been getting such good buzz and reception for Japan that I think it'll get in. Same as Society of the Snow. This is a J.A. Bayona film. It is a Netflix film. I think that all helps it. And then The Promised Land. This one has Mads Mikkelsen in it. It's Denmark's submission. Denmark is always kind of a safe bet sometimes because Denmark films are usually well respected. Another Round got in a few years ago. So those are the 5 I'm rolling with right now, but a lot could change. If Anatomy of a Fall was in here, it wouldn't change much because that would just replace Taste of Things. So it's not even like that has much to do with how this race is going to shape up, only in terms of the winner, which I think is definitely going to be Zone of Interest at this point. Documentary, Beyond Utopia is the safest bet for a documentary nomination here, but I'm putting it at number 2 because the second you put something as the front runner, it's going to miss. And if Beyond Utopia misses an Oscar nomination, I'm going to be furious. Not as furious as I would be if Guardians missed makeup. I'm not going to walk barefoot to California to riot. But if Beyond Utopia doesn't get a nomination, I think it's severely misguided. Or maybe those other documentaries are just masterpieces because that nomination needs to happen. Beyond Utopia needs to get nominated, but I put it at number 2 because I don't want to jinx it. So in number 1, I put 20 Days in Mariupol, which also feels like a safe bet. I feel like American Symphony at this point feels like a safe bet. It was also something I was considering in Best Song if you look back a few graphics back. And then I put The Eternal Memory and The Deepest Breath only because those are the ones I've heard the most about. Again, this is another category that I feel like as the weeks go on and we see other precursors, we're going to have a better understanding of what those films are going to be. So there are my Oscar predictions. I am exhausted. I've been talking almost 40 minutes about this stuff, but I do it because I love you people and I love the Oscars, and I'm waiting for the Academy to take notice and nominate the the things that they should nominate. I don't know. I'm getting tired, so I'm going to log off right now. But thank you so much for watching. And thank you to these supporters who helped donate in February, way back when, as part of our subathon. As I said, till the end of the year, I will be shouting them out on every individual video I do. And their contributions are greatly appreciated. And I love y'all. So thank you all so much for watching. As I said, I'm going to trickle out some reviews that I've been holding back on, including a review for The Holdovers, for Killers of the Flower Moon, and of course my big New York Film Fest wrap-up video where I'll be reviewing May, December, The Zone of Interest, Priscilla, what else did I see? The Taste of Things, Ferrari, Maestro. So you're getting reviews for all that stuff toward the end of November, mid-November, because I'm also going away for 2 weeks, so I need to have some stuff to kind of put out there on the channel while I am away, so you all can stay well-fed and happy. And that is all I got for you today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Check out the Dyl Pickle Podcast if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast, thank you. And check out the Dyl Pickle Movie Network on YouTube, because I have a face. It's not a great face, but it's a face nonetheless, and I would love for you to check it out. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.